Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dreamcatcher podcast, a place where your dreams can find a voice. In our divided climate with heightened concerns and emotions about diversity and inclusion, developing an open mindset has become more important than ever. But true change can only happen when there is a shift in the way we view our differences. To shed light on this important issue, I invited Soo Bong Peer. Soo was raised in a South Korean military, political, and diplomatic family. She grew up in South Korea, Mexico, the UK, Japan, and the US. With more than 30 years of experience in strategic marketing, global branding, business development, and leadership development, Pierre's hands-on career, combined with her personal background, brings a unique perspective to today's struggles. During our conversation, Soo taps into her expertise and background to speak about the importance of developing a diversity mindset, both on a personal and societal level. She also shares advice on how we can get over our own biases and prejudices, and instead focus on the commonalities that unite us and make us one human family. If you liked what you heard, please don't forget to like, rate, share, and subscribe to this podcast. Thank you. Hello, Soo. How are you today?
Fine, thank you. And Celine, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for agreeing to be here. I'm just so glad that we're having this opportunity to speak, and I am just excited to hear about your thoughts on diversity and why it's important for everyone on the planet to really be open to it.
Mm-hmm.
It is a very timely topic given what's going on in the United States and also the rest of the world.
Yes.
So I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about.
Okay, yeah, looking forward to.
Okay, so let's start out by talking a little bit about you. You have a very interesting background. You are truly a global citizen. You lived in different parts of the world. You grew up in Korea. You lived in Mexico. You lived in England, Japan, and the United States, where you currently live. So tell us, what was that like living in so many places, and how did it influence you on a personal and a professional level?
You know, I was born in South Korea and lived there until I was 14. And South Korea was and is very racially homogeneous country. So until we left the country, all I knew was Asian race, Asian and Korean culture. And my father relocated to Mexico. So that's when we left for Mexico. I was there for 4 years. And then my parents moved to the UK. And I came here for college and spent extended time in London. And then they moved to Japan, then back to South Korea. So I spent a lot of time where my parents were. But for me, I came here for college, then end up staying here. So America is my home. So I was exposed to diverse people, mindsets, and culture, as well as I had to navigate diversity as an Asian minority in the US. And it's combined the feeling that I lived through and what I felt gave me a good insight. But what I learned from all my journey is that regardless of where I was, people will people. We share the human dynamics of, for example, human virtues, love, openness, as well as the human fallacies like discrimination and closed-mindedness. So we're different and we express different, but for example, even in racially homogeneous country like Korea or Japan, there exist biases and prejudices, and they're mostly based on social class or education. In the US, it's race and skin color. But despite all our differences, we connect on our humanity, regardless who we are on this planet. And And when we embrace our similarities, we open a window for connection. When we focus on differences, we create divide. So yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's just beautiful, but I'm curious to know, do you reach those conclusions after your specific experiences living in those countries and moving around so much? Was there ever a time where you had to really change yourself to fit into these different places that you lived in?
First I thought I had to learn their culture. I had to fit in. I feel awkward. But after a while, I realized I am who I am. And people receive me much better when I'm open and be myself. It connects to others. When I feel like I have to be a specific way, it creates a divide. We are feeling beings, regardless where we are. When we are comfortable in our own skin, others responded. But yes, I had to go through a lot of journey and challenges to understand who am I. you know
Right. Yeah, I totally understand. So you're especially more sensitive to these matters, and anyone who goes through these issues of finding it hard to fit in because they feel like the minority or the person
right.
who's different in the room, the different one in the room. Yeah.
And I think being a minority in the US, in America, evokes a lot of feeling of alienation, being constricted and not belong. And I know that's not the intent of racial grouping of our diversity efforts, but people don't see that. Being a minority statistically is one thing.
Mhm.
Being a minority emotionally is another. So
Mm.
I hope we move to a place where people can just see each other as human beings. And on top of it, by 2042, it's projected that minority population will surpass the majority population. So then what happens? So I am not very fond of racial labeling or racial grouping. I think it divides us in a big way.
I totally agree. And I mean, with what's going on with the Asian Americans right now, how is that affecting you? Has that caused you to revisit your beliefs?
No,
Has it caused any challenges?
no. I think crime is a crime, regardless of who committed it. But I think making this a big deal against it without having sound the data to create this uh, story that that man was against the Asian and creating this media or that Asians are being attacked. I think we have to be mindful of how we look at it and be mindful of not making all these assumptions, because at the end of the day, crime is a crime. It makes no difference who committed it. They should be absolutely tried and punished. So I think creating this news beat creates more fear, more divide. I think we should just focus on the crime.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And diversity nowadays is so much more than the color of our skin or our facial features. It extends to other ways that we describe ourselves, other labels, such as gender, for example. So, what are your thoughts on that and how the whole concept of diversity has evolved over the years?
I think when people look at another regardless who they are, as an individual, unique individual, as a person, will reduce this divide. Whether gender issues, race issues, or whatever issues, we're people. Why should be so highlighted? If when we connect with the others with open mind, open arms, and just look at that person as an individual, you create the human space that people can come together.
A lot of people find this difficult to do because they have all these unconscious biases and prejudices that they might have learned when they were younger.
Yes, of
So,
course. But
what are
while
some of the
bias,
steps that they can take to become aware of those unconscious forces, and how can they start changing that?
I think we have to first look at ourselves. If
Yeah.
I identify myself as an Asian minority, I look at everybody else that way, as a race. If I look at myself as, hey, I'm an empowered human being and I'm comfortable being who I am, that changes the space. So biases and prejudice is not just about someone else, it's about us. And when we can look at and change, that changes the way we look at others. At the end of the day, nobody can change anybody else except their own. Otherwise, it's a mandate, it's a judgment, it's a shaming. I think we have to just come back and say, who am I? Regardless of who we are, we can be very proud of who I am, who we are. And, but we talk about biases, but wouldn't it surprise you if I view the diversity mandate of racial grouping is a systematic bias? Because you're looking at a person as a label. You erase a unique human being behind.
Yeah, you take away their humanity, essentially.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And that's a bias. We don't even think about it because Americans have been conditioned for decades to look at people as a race. And we're far more than a label.
Yeah. So what you're essentially saying is that get comfortable with who you are first,
Yes.
because it's those insecurities and that sense of superiority that's causing you to minimize
Yes.
people and label them.
Yes. And another thing is we have to increase our empathy. When we develop and expand our empathy, it really touches ourselves first because we are okay with ourselves. And then when we have an empathy, we can have different understanding of others. We all had a different journey. And not one is better than the other. So we expand the capacity to be empathetic. Doesn't mean we accept or condone the wrong acts, but having empathy will minimize the reactive emotions. And the other thing we have to really work on is reduce and be mindful of making blanket assumptions and judgment. That inside,
Stereotype.
and that is a bias in itself, and it only incites anger and divide with people. So that, to me, making judgment, shaming others, it's about the person who is doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And you believe that that there are certain elements that connect and divide us. And that's something that we should keep in mind when we are developing diversity policies and programs. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
I think for example, for diversity policies and programs, the most powerful litmus test would be for people to assess and question, is what we are doing bringing people together or divide people? And the most important part of our being human is we want to belong. When you divide people, you lose the sense of belonging. And so when we feel and look at others as individuals who share our humanity, you create the connection right away. And to me, if we can look at others as an individual, not label, I think that's a huge step. And also the companies must be mindful to help people to move away from labeling others and interact with individuals and help them to create the environment that fosters a sense of belonging. That means every employee must feel they matter equally. It's so important. And for to be a successful organization, you need that feeling, the workforce, they feel they are part of cohesive team driving collective goals. It's critical. So I call it developing a color neutral lens. Not colorblind. It's impossible physically to be colorblind. Mm-hmm. Color neutral is if we have two eyes to see, of course we'll see differences of others, but those differences are irrelevant in interacting with others. So we meet an individual, not a label. That changes the human dynamics right away, bring people together.
Right. And the only way for that to happen is for leaders to develop that sensibility and that empathy, as you mentioned earlier.
We need both.
Yes.
The individuals can start being aware of their lens. Mm. You know, a good example will be when you meet a new person, do I see a label or do I meet an individual behind? By paying attention to that, each person is going to raise their lens, awareness of their lens of how they see others.
So the question is, do I see a person or do I see a label?
A label, yeah. You know, you can, oh, Sue, she's Asian. That's it. I'm more than an Asian. Or, oh, I met Sue and she's whatever you think I can be, a nice person. And she happened to be Asian. I am Asian, but that doesn't define me. I'm much more than an Asian. I'm mother, wife, friend, colleague, writer, coach. I mean, just like
you're multidimensional.
Yeah, it's not just me.
Yeah.
It's just like everyone else on this planet. So going back to your question, yes, we need to be aware of our lens and trying to shift. But it is critical for leaders to foster, develop that same lens, because their actions, mindsets and actions drive the climate of an organization or the country.
Okay. And empathy, like some people are naturally more empathetic.
Yes.
Than others. So yes. Is that a quality that you can develop?
Absolutely. It's like when we see a movie, we're moved. That's empathy. So when somebody feels like, you know, I have a real, doesn't have to be just a diversity. It's any relationship. If somebody feels there's some challenge that they can connect with others, it's important to look at how am I looking at others? How am I behaving? I'd like to know more. And, you know, I'm not thinking about others. I'm just thinking myself. You can start opening. You can start shifting. You can get feedback from your loved ones. We can all make a shift.
Yeah. Yeah, and we definitely need more education. We need people to become more aware that this tendency is within them.
Yeah. So for example, if a colleague of mine or I was open-minded and I share, hey, when I'm labeled, it makes me feel alienated, constricted, and not belong. They don't know that. Once they understand how it makes labeling can make a person feel, they can start thinking about it.
Yeah, I agree. And I can relate to you because I too, for the longest time, I was not comfortable with revealing that I'm Indian. I used to always not reveal that I'm Indian, or I try to somehow downplay it.
Yes.
And people would still press on. Okay, no, where are you from? What is your ethnicity? And I would finally like, yes, I'm Indian. But I was born here. So I was born in Dubai. I just make sure they know that. And then as they get to know me, they're like, oh, you're not like other Indians. You're just not, you don't look like an Indian. And as if that was a good thing. So for the longest time, that stuck with me. And I was just like, and then I came over here when I was 17. And then I said, people are more accepting. They didn't really care. I mean, that's my experience. I mean, I don't know.
But I think Americans are far more accepting and open than any culture that I know.
Exactly.
The racial divide is a big deal now, which is so unfortunate.
Yes.
After 60 years of diversity advancement effort, we're actually in not a great place.
But Sue, I think the U.S. it's pretty advanced compared to a lot of other countries. So I just think that they spend more time on these issues. They put everything under the microscope.
Right. But we're still dividing people. Why can't we just undo racial grouping? And whenever, you're right. I feel this is a much more open country than anywhere else.
Absolutely. I feel it. The minute I land here, I feel it.
But they stereotype people. It's like they're going against Asians. But what does that do? They're going against Muslims. What does that do?
I know. It is certain sects of the population, I believe. I mean, if you go...
Media defines everyone by skin color. Our political leadership defines everyone by skin color. That influence is not very good. And it makes people feel like, oh, that's the right thing to do. And I think that they have to examine their lens and examine what's the motivation there. Obviously, there's a motivation agenda, but it doesn't help people to bring together. And we know the racial divide is a big deal here. And obviously it should, because we're more multicultural here, right? So, but because of it, they also have to foster the sense of unity. We don't have that.
Yeah.
Better than other countries, but other countries most of the time are pretty racially homogeneous. Not America, right?
It depends where, right? Like in the UK, obviously, is pretty much like the United States. It's so diverse. And Dubai is also very diverse.
Right.
A huge expat population.
And there's a biases and prejudices everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
But like my friends who come from like the UK, others, they certainly feel like I'm becoming much more conscious of my race. They have other issues to deal with over there, but not necessarily labeling people by race as much. They do have a huge prejudice, absolutely.
Interesting. Okay. And what are some of the things that you suggest people do who feel like they're being labeled? Like what can they do to feel better?
It's a self-development. They have to really examine how they feel about themselves and ask, is this truth? And it's not. We feel that way, and we're products of the environment. So when the environment always labels you as a minority or this or that, it affects us. But we have to rise above that and say, I'm much more than what people describe me or stereotype me. And it's really one's journey to be aware of how one feels. For example, for a long time, whenever I felt like I'm a minority, I feel, oh my God, and I run away. You have to face it. And it's not What does minority mean? That doesn't describe me. And I think it is a personal journey. It's a process. And the nice thing about it, the more we become empowered, the energy with others change too. Because in our politically correct society, people are very guarded to say much. So then if we have certain personal insecurity, we can assume, oh, that person doesn't like me because I'm a minority. In fact, that person may be not as comfortable asking a lot of questions. So when we are comfortable with ourselves, open up, that touches others. And then your experience changes. And every time you experience a little bit different, it changes our sense of security as well.
So really share and communicate your feelings.
To yourself first.
To yourself first, yes. Yeah.
Because we run away a lot of times. We don't want to face what we feel.
Right. And, I think that people really need that education. And I think it really starts from home, don't you think? We need parents and school people at school, teachers to really
but a lot of times
help kids realize.
Like immigrants who come here, parents are not aware. They, oftentimes they don't even speak English. Yeah. And a lot of kids who are bilingual, like Latinos and any race, and they have to fend themselves to feel, and they can't really talk to their parents. And they feel somewhat less reduced by being always called as a minority. And I think it's probably a good idea for them to get together with others to share, hey, this is not how I want to feel. What can I do? I think, ideally, that group can be diverse group, not just the one race, because then you're talking to each other, the same issues. I think it shouldn't take the training. Diversity is not a lecture. It's about our mindset. It's about human dynamics. So if we can share our emotions, it actually changes how we think we are, because oftentimes it's not the reality, it's feelings.
I think we really need more people like you who bring awareness to these really pertinent issues. And I'm sure that people who are listening to this will be inspired by what you just shared. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for receiving me well. Appreciate it.
So for anyone who's interested in learning more about Soo and her services, you can visit SooPeerAssociates.com. I'll add the link in the description. Soo, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Yes, I just published a book called The Essential Diversity Mindset. Mm-hmm. And I think it will resonate with a lot of things we talked about. And it's available on Amazon, Barnes Nobles, Bookshop, and Indie Books.
Yeah, I'll make sure I'll add that in the link.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. Soo, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you for making the time to be here.
Of course. Thank you for having me again. Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.